Donald Trump is not the only leader who is taking the Wuhan virus lightly. Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli is ditching every COVID protocol in his country. At least 7 of his close aides are positive. And it's a question of who blinks first. In Thailand, as the protesters and the supporters of the Thai monarchy flood the country's streets. We bring you a special report, but we begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Lebanon and Israel started unprecedented talks on their disputed maritime border in a brief meeting which lasted a little over an hour. The next round of talks is to be held on the 28th of October. The talks were mediated by the United States, which has pushed for negotiations to resolve the dispute over potentially gas-rich Mediterranean waters. A day after Johnson & Johnson temporarily halted its COVID-19 vaccine trials, the United States pharmaceutical firm Eli Lilly has paused a late-stage trial of its antibody treatment against COVID-19 over an unspecified safety concern. Norway has blamed Russia for an August cyber attack on the email system in its parliament. Norway's foreign minister has called it a serious incident affecting the country's most important democratic institution. Moscow, on the other hand, has denied the claim. The head of the British spy agency MI5 has said Russia poses the biggest state-based threat to the UK, but China is the growing long-term challenge. Ken McCallum, the Director General of MI5, said the agency is focused on increasing its work to counter Chinese activities in a prioritized way. First case of a COVID-19 reinfection-related death has been reported from the Netherlands. The Netherlands National Institute for Public Health has confirmed that an elderly Dutch woman has died after contracting the infection for a second time. US space agency NASA has announced an international agreement called the Artemis Accords. The agency is shaping standards for building long-term settlements on the lunar surface. 8 countries have signed the pact: the United States, Australia, Canada, Japan, Luxembourg, Italy, United Kingdom, and the United Arab Emirates. The aim is to establish safety zones that would surround future moon bases to prevent conflict and allow private companies to own the lunar resources they mine. The biggest World War II bomb ever found in Poland exploded underwater as Navy divers tried to defuse it. More than 750 people had been evacuated from the area near the Piast Canal, where the tall boy bomb used by Britain's Royal Air Force was found. Authorities said that the object can be considered as neutralized. Flooding due to incessant rain in the Indian states of Telangana, Odisha and Andhra Pradesh has led to disruption of services and waterlogging in several cities. Reports say 15 people have died across the 3 states. Neymar has become Brazil's second highest goal scorer of all time after netting a hat-trick in a 4-2 victory over Peru in the qualifiers for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. The 5-time world champions had to twice rally from a goal down to register their second straight win in the qualifiers. Neymar scored 2 penalties and added another in injury time to complete his 4th international hat-trick. The 29-year-old has gone past Ronaldo Nazaro's tally of 62 goals and now trails only Pelé in Brazil's scoring charts. Elsewhere, Lionel Messi's Argentina also kept up their perfect record in the qualifiers with a 2-1 win over Bolivia. The world's top-ranked golfer, American Dustin Johnson, has tested positive for COVID-19. The reigning FedEx Cup champion and the PGA Tour's Player of the Year was to return to action for the first time since last month's US Open, but has now withdrawn from this week's CJ Cup and gone into self-isolation. The 36-year-old began experiencing symptoms over the weekend and informed PGA Tour officials on Monday before being tested for coronavirus. Johnson is the latest of at least 15 golfers to have tested positive since the PGA Tour returned to action in June.
China could not have or would not have expected this. It has suffered not one but two major setbacks from a country that Beijing thought it could ride roughshod over. Our cover story tonight is about Bangladesh and how it is putting China in its place. Dhaka has turned down Chinese vaccine trials and cancelled a major Chinese infrastructure project. This is a lesson for China on how it cannot always have its way. This is a lesson for other countries in the region on how sovereignty should not be mortgaged for Chinese cash. And this is an opportunity for India to make China's loss its gain and further strengthen the relationship with Dhaka. Now, it's no secret that India and China are vying for influence in this region. Bangladesh has made the most of this contest, with its Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina mastering the fine art of diplomatic balance. Tonight, we'll discuss all of this. First, let me tell you what Bangladesh is doing with China. It has refused to fund a Chinese vaccine trial. We're talking about Sinovac. And we've reported on this story before on this show. China promised Bangladesh 100,000 free doses of the Wuhan virus vaccine. Sinovac is a Chinese drug maker. It wanted to run trials in Bangladesh. The money for these trials was supposed to come from the government of China. After all of these lofty promises, China did a U-turn. It demanded money from Dhaka to co-finance the trials. How did Bangladesh respond? In kind. It has rejected China's offer and shown Sinovac the door. Here is what the Health Minister of Bangladesh said, and I'm quoting, "A country's job is done when it approves the clinical test of a vaccine. They never asked for co-funding when they sought approval for the trial. This is not a contract we have with the Chinese government. This is a private company, and we cannot have a co-funding arrangement with a private company." Well, China may not understand this because they don't get the difference between public and private. Anyway, the bad news for Beijing does not end with this one. A major infrastructure project has met the same fate. Bangladesh has cancelled the plan to develop a deep-sea port. China wanted to build one here at the Sonadia Island off the southeastern coast of Bangladesh. Now, reports say India had opposed this project because such a port in Chinese hands would have posed a security and strategic challenge to India, given its location in the Bay of Bengal and proximity to India. The deep-sea port was first proposed in the year 2006. China agreed to finance this project and build the port. But Bangladesh never went ahead with it. It formally revoked the Sonadia Deep Sea Port Authority Act in the month of August, a law that would have facilitated the construction of the port. Dhaka has junked the law and it has terminated the project. This is a geopolitical win for India and its allies. Why? Because Bangladesh will now build a deep sea port not with the Chinese but with the Japanese. In fact, the work has already begun. The deep sea port will be constructed at Matarbari, that is 25 kilometers away from Sonadia. The port will be funded by Japan. It is expected to be completed by 2025. And with this move, Bangladesh has shown that it won't be dictated by the Chinese. It will accept Chinese investment on its own terms and not expose itself to the debt trap. And this, by the way, has been the pattern. China has moved aggressively to finance projects in Bangladesh, and Dhaka has borrowed cautiously. Two reasons why. One, the fear of the debt trap. Bangladesh does not want to meet the fate of Sri Lanka and Pakistan. And two, Dhaka wants to avoid a diplomatic battle with New Delhi. China has been trying to surround the Indian subcontinent with a network of ports. Bangladesh was a part of that plan. While India still needs to do more to neutralize the string of pearls threat, for now it seems like Dhaka wants to avoid falling into China's sphere of influence, and that's good news. Bangladesh has tactfully approached this relationship with both India and China. It has kept ties with both these regional powers and leveraged one against the other for better deals and terms. Our next report decodes Sheikh Hasina's South Asia strategy.
When Sheikh Hasina took oath as Prime Minister for a record fourth time, a major diplomatic challenge was staring at her. India and China were competing for greater influence in Bangladesh. Other South Asian countries had been forced to pick a side. But Bangladesh did better. It chose both India and China. So far, Sheikh Hasina has managed to walk the diplomatic tightrope successfully. Under her, Bangladesh has maintained a healthy balance between India and China, a balance dictated by her national interest. Bangladesh is almost entirely surrounded by India. The two countries share a 4,096-kilometer-long border. A good relationship with New Delhi is critical for the economic development and national security of Bangladesh. At the same time, a developing country needs money. Bangladesh deepened its relationship with China to bankroll key infrastructure projects. But it's not buried under Chinese debt like some of its South Asian neighbors. Unlike Pakistan and Sri Lanka, Bangladesh has retained some autonomy. Dhaka's recent decision to bury the Sonadia deep sea port project shows it is being selective in granting projects to China. When concerns grew over rising Chinese influence, Dhaka assured New Delhi that it remains committed to strong ties with India. During the visit of India's Foreign Secretary to Dhaka in August, Bangladesh and India discussed a 2-year-long roadmap to improve their relationship. Both sides also agreed to open a travel bubble. Low levels of debt have allowed Bangladesh to retain a degree of strategic autonomy. According to the Ministry of Finance, the external debt of Bangladesh stood at a little more than $33 billion in 2018. One estimate says that Chinese loans account for just 6% of the total debt, while the total foreign debt is less than 14% of the GDP of Bangladesh. That gives Bangladesh room to maneuver. Sheikh Hasina has choices, which means both India and China will have to fight harder for the attention of the Bangladeshi Prime Minister. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The crisis between China and Bangladesh, does it spell opportunity for India? Is it an opportunity to mend old ties? Dhaka and Delhi are old allies. These two countries have cooperated on several fronts: economic, diplomatic, development, security. And how can we forget the people-to-people ties, very old and strong? India and Bangladesh used to be the textbook example of friendly neighbors, till a series of events loosened the historical ties. In 2016, China offered a $24 billion loan to Bangladesh. The money brought Beijing close to Dhaka and it moved Delhi away. Bangladesh was unhappy about India's National Registration of Citizenship and Citizen Amendment Act. It wrongly felt that the law targeted Bangladeshis. In July this year, a phone call started various rumors. Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had picked up her Pakistani counterpart Imran Khan's phone call. The two leaders reportedly spoke for 20 minutes. Reports claimed Kashmir was mentioned. This, of course, did not go down very well with India. Bangladesh then was unhappy when India banned onion exports twice in 2 years. Dampening the ties further was India's water dispute with Bangladesh, the Teesta dispute. It has been long pending, since 1972 to be precise. It involves India's internal politics and it is not easy to solve. But it may be the time to take on the challenge and end this diplomatic tug of war. I'll give you reasons why. First, the Teesta water sharing dispute has been on the waiting list for way too long. This here is the Teesta River. It is 414 kilometers long. It flows through the Indian states of West Bengal and Sikkim before going into the Bay of Bengal through Bangladesh. Teesta is a lifeline for several districts of West Bengal. In Bangladesh, the Teesta flood plain covers 14% of the country's cropped area. The river is important to both India and Bangladesh, and the dispute arises from the question of who gets how much water. In 1983, an ad hoc agreement allocated 39% of the water to India. Bangladesh got 36%. The agreement lapsed in 2 years. In 1984, they decided to give 42.5% of the water to India, 37.5% to Bangladesh. In 2011, the countries were on the verge of signing a water-sharing pact. Then Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, was about to visit Bangladesh, but the deal was scuttled by India's internal politics. In 2014, Prime Minister Narendra Modi took office. Bangladesh was integral to his neighbourhood first policy. He visited the country in June 2015 and he told Sheikh Hasina that he was confident of reaching a fair solution on Teesta. 5 years on, there has been no resolution, mostly because West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee won't play ball. Bangladesh has been unhappy about the low flow of the Teesta River. Dhaka claims that its paddy crops and fisheries have been affected. There is a stalemate. It's out in the open. And China has been trying to exploit it. How? By portraying itself as a better neighbor. And this is reason number 2. Beijing has offered a $1 billion loan to Dhaka. It is for a comprehensive management and restoration project on the Teesta River. While China's offer is aimed at debt-trapping Dhaka, it will not be in India's interest if it loses another ally to China. India must solve the Teesta dispute to avoid all of this. Reason number 3. Now is the perfect time. Over the last few months, India has become more sensitive towards its eastern neighbour. India has supported Bangladesh's stand on Rohingyas. The Wuhan virus pandemic has brought India and Bangladesh closer. New Delhi has provided medical aid to Dhaka. Bangladesh has promised $1.5 million to Prime Minister Modi's call for regional emergency fund. Freight services between the two countries have been increased in the last few months. India has provided 10 locomotives to Bangladesh's railways. The point is simple. Ties are coming back on track. They appear to be, at least. And this is the perfect time to talk Teesta. Reason number 4. Solving the Teesta dispute and cementing ties with Bangladesh takes India further towards its goal of being a global leader. And to begin with, the leader of its immediate neighbourhood. More countries are disengaging with China, and this is India's opportunity. There is already a head start. The United States has expressed interest in seeking India's view on the Indian neighbourhood. As Washington looks to reset ties with Dhaka, India needs to build on all of this. And since we're talking about our neighbours, let's discuss what Nepal is up to. It's been a while since we heard from the Prime Minister of Nepal, the one and only Palki Sharma Upadhyay. He's back in the headlines, yes and no. He hasn't laid claim to Indian territories this time. The Prime Minister is making news for his lack of seriousness on the Wuhan virus. At least 7 of his close aides have tested positive in the recent days. But the 69-year-old Comrade Oli could not care less. Forget going into self-isolation, he's holding party meetings, interacting with opposition leaders. And amid all this denial, Kathmandu is preparing for a high-profile visit from India. A visit by the Indian Army Chief, General Naravane. All this and more in our next report.
He is 69 years old. He has pre-existing health conditions. He has undergone 2 kidney transplants. And he frequently gets hospitalized for cough and fever. The Prime Minister of Nepal falls in the high-risk category of getting infected by the Wuhan virus. But there is no stopping him from flouting COVID-19 guidelines. Palki Sharma Upadhyay is still holding meetings despite several of his close aides testing positive in recent days. This includes Nepal's Tourism Minister Yogesh Bhattarai, the Education Minister Giriraj Pokhrel, the Prime Minister's Chief Advisor Bishnu Rimal, his Press Advisor Surya Thapa, and Foreign Affairs Advisor Rajan Bhattarai. The virus has permeated Nepal's political leadership in Oli's orbit. But the Nepalese Prime Minister is yet to take the virus seriously. He has not gone into self-isolation. He is still participating in his party's secretariat meetings. He is still interacting with opposition leaders. And there is no official word on whether he has even undergone a COVID-19 test. Such lack of seriousness by the leader of 30 million people is being called out by the Nepalese media. Leading newspapers in Nepal are reminding Oli how his government's health protocols are applicable to all, including the Prime Minister himself. But the reminders may do little to convince the Prime Minister. KP Sharma Oli has never taken this pandemic seriously. He started by calling it a simple case of cough and cold that could easily be sneezed away. He then peddled bizarre remedies like turmeric, garlic, and ginger to combat the disease. And when all else failed, he blamed India for the virus from China. The lack of seriousness on the virus continues, but there is growing enthusiasm within the Oli government to fix training ties with India. Nepal has extended an invitation to the Indian Army chief for a visit that had previously been postponed. The announcement has been made by the Nepal Army. The visit could take place in November this year. The primary agenda will be settling boundary disputes. But reports also say that Indian Army Chief General Naravane will be conferred the honorary rank of General of Nepal's Army by the country's President, Vidya Devi Bhandari. Facing growing criticism at home for its pandemic response, the Oli government seems to be extending an olive branch to New Delhi. The coming weeks in this Himalayan republic will be something to watch out for. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Time now for a reminder. 3 weeks away from the US presidential election, 20 days to be precise, on the 3rd of November, the United States of America will vote in one of the most bitterly contested elections in recent history. Donald Trump desperately wants to secure 4 more years at the White House, and he is pulling out all stops to ensure that he does. In the next 3 minutes, we'll tell you what the US president has been up to. Donald Trump says he has recovered from the Wuhan virus, or the Kung flu, as he likes to call it. He's eager to prove himself healthy after days of hospitalization, and what better way to do so than hold some rallies? So Trump has hit the campaign trail once again. On Tuesday, he made a grand return at a campaign rally in Orlando in Florida. Trump declared that he was in perfect shape. He tossed face masks into the audience. He offered to give everyone a big fat kiss. His supporters couldn't be happier, even those who fall in the high-risk category. Listen to this.
I think this COVID is all political, just to make Trump look bad.
I think the virus has been extremely politicated. It has been used to lock down this country, which is what'll happen if Joe Biden is reelected. They will lock down the nation.
I'm not concerned. I've been working all the time, ain't got no COVID. I take vitamins, I eat healthy. I just ain't worried about it.
Just ain't worried about it. Neither is the US president. He's racing against the clock to make up for the time he lost after testing positive. Today, Trump took his campaign to Pennsylvania, a battleground state that he won by a narrow margin in 2016. Speaking in Johnstown in Pennsylvania, Trump declared how he did not care about being politically correct. He requested, quote-unquote, suburban women to like him, and once again offered to kiss everyone, every single man and woman in the audience. You have to watch this.
Can I ask you to do me a favor? Suburban women, will you please like me? Remember? Please. Please. I saved your damn neighborhood, okay? The other thing, I don't have that much time to be that nice. You know, I can do it, but I gotta go quickly. And now I'm immune, they tell me. I'm immune. I could come down and start kissing everybody. I'll kiss every guy, man and woman, man and woman. Look at that guy, how handsome he is. I'll kiss him. Not with a lot of enjoyment, but that's okay.
After such heartfelt offers, the US president decided to shake a leg. With the 1978 mega hit YMCA blaring on loudspeakers, Trump danced in his trademark style, pumping his fists as the crowd cheered. Again, you have this, because this is just the beginning, we're told. Trump plans on holding many such electrifying rallies in the coming days. Iowa, North Carolina, Wisconsin. It's a busy week ahead. What about the presidential debates? Are they happening at all? The second one was supposed to take place on the 15th of October. It's been cancelled. Joe Biden is insisting on a virtual debate, citing Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis. Trump is not too keen on the idea of a virtual debate. He wants the face-off to be live and in person. His team explained why in a campaign ad that features some out-of-context clips of Joe Biden rambling on a TV set as Trump himself remains entirely silent. The video editing is rich. The irony, even richer. I'll leave you with this.
First of all, where do you want to see the court take the country? And secondly, what's your view on how the Constitution should be interpreted?
That's like saying before you got in this program, if you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not, what do you think, huh?
That's the question. Please, quiet, everybody.
Hold
on just a moment, folks, because this is going to end up getting out of control. Let's try to keep it quiet so for the candidates and for the American people.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
I want to thank you both for participating. Now the decision is up to you.
These are testing times for the global economy. Yesterday, the International Monetary Fund predicted a deep global recession in the days ahead. The IMF says world growth will contract by close to 5%, and it recommends taxing the rich. Here's why.
This pandemic is true.
On Tuesday, IMF chief economist Geeta Gopinath had some bad news.
So we continue to project a deep recession in 2020 with global growth projected to be minus 4.4%. Therefore, we see that the recovery from this catastrophic collapse will likely be long, uneven, and highly uncertain.
The global economy will fall into a deep recession this year, with the road to recovery increasingly looking uncertain. In Geeta Gopinath's own words, the economic crisis triggered by the Wuhan virus will leave deep scars. Job losses, bankruptcies, mounting debt, and loss in output will lead to a loss of a whopping $28 trillion by 2025. To bounce back, the IMF recommends that the world economy must swallow the bitter pill. It wants countries with large debt levels to tax the rich. The pandemic could leave a mountain of debt behind. The pandemic response will bring debt levels of countries close to 100% of global output. Countries that can't pay back could default on their payments. Several major countries are at risk. Before the pandemic, major economies used to borrow beyond GDP levels. This includes Japan, where gross debt accounted for 235% of the GDP in 2017. By 2018, Italy's debt accounted for 132% of its GDP. America's debt accounted for 104% of its GDP. France, 98%, Canada, 90%, and the UK, 87%. The IMF says governments with high debt should consider raising taxes on the affluent, taxing purchases of high-end property, and taxes on capital gains and wealth.
Now, this is the worst crisis since the Great Depression, and it will take significant innovation on the policy front at both at the national level and at the international level to recover from this great lockdown. The challenges are daunting, but there are reasons to be hopeful.
The IMF projects that China will be the only global economy to register some growth this year, and all major emerging economies are expected to contract. India is expected to face its worst contraction on record by more than 10%. The IMF wants governments to limit the bleeding by cash transfers, wage subsidies, and unemployment insurance. But the question is, where will the money for that come from? While it cannot be the only solution, higher tax rates for the rich might be inevitable if governments around the world run short of ways to raise more cash. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The United Nations Human Rights Council might want to consider changing its name. You may ask why. And I'll tell you why. Look at who's sitting on the council now. Serial human rights abusers, countries with abysmal human rights records, countries that top the cruelty chart, China, Russia, and Pakistan. If it weren't true, it would be funny. But these human rights abusers are now legit members of the UNHRC, the Human Rights Council, and the joke is on the United Nations and all of us. The UNHRC has 47 board members. The election was held for 15 seats. These seats are region-specific. Russia and Cuba ran uncontested. China, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia were in a five-way race. China and Pakistan won. Saudi Arabia surprisingly lost by 7 votes. And I insist on you looking at the numbers. Voting for the UNHRC were the 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly, 193. Do you know how many countries voted for Pakistan? 169. 169 countries believe Pakistan should have this seat. China got 139 votes, 139. Which are these countries? Do they not know what's happening in Pakistan? The forced conversions, the enforced disappearances, the brutality on minorities, the attack on freedom of expression, freedom of religion. What about those who voted for China? Are they blind to what's happening in Xinjiang? Or do they not consider the Uyghurs to be human? Or were the headlines from Hong Kong not loud enough? Or was exporting a deadly virus not an attack on human rights? On what basis did 139 countries vote for China? And who are these countries? The thing is, you and I may never know, because these votes were cast in secret ballot. And that takes away the accountability from the countries voting human rights abusers into this council, which is why tonight I have a question for all of you, and I want all of you to think about this. Shouldn't votes to critical world bodies be made transparent? For starters, it will remove the scope of back-channel talks, because countries like China are infamous for checkbook diplomacy. For all you know, they bought some of these votes, perhaps all of them. This abuse of muscle power cannot be stopped till votes become transparent. A transparent voting system will make the voting process more responsible. When China harvests kidneys of Uyghur Muslims, or when mass graves are discovered in Gilgit-Baltistan, or when Russia attacks another critic, and when the resolutions on these issues are muted by members of the United Nations Human Rights Council, you and I will be able to hold countries accountable for voting rogue nations into the Human Rights Council. In the long run, a transparent voting system will also make this institution stronger. It will restore people's faith in the Council. Here's something else that I want to tell you. The United States is not part of the UNHRC. It pulled out in 2018, citing injustice to Israel. After yesterday's vote, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo posted a tweet. It reads, and I'm quoting, "The election of China, Russia and Cuba to the UN Human Rights Council validates the US decision to withdraw from the Council in 2018. The election of Russia, China and Pakistan is being criticized the world over. Israel's permanent representative to the UN tweeted this video message. He says the UNHRC has nothing to do with protecting human rights. Instead, it's more interested in violating human rights." Listen to him.
Today's Human Rights Council elections prove once again that this council has nothing to do with protecting human rights and everything to do with violating them. Since 2006, the Council has adopted 90 resolutions condemning Israel, more than all the resolutions against Syria, North Korea and Iran combined. This obsessive focus with Israel, along with its protection of oppressive dictatorial regimes, shows that the Human Rights Council is in the business of whitewashing the crimes of these countries. I call on all democracies that are still members of the Council to resign immediately from this shameful and anti-Semitic body.
The UNHRC is in the business of whitewashing crimes. This is a very strong allegation, and it is true. We gave you examples yesterday. You can catch the episode online in case you missed it. My point is very simple. The UNHRC cannot do justice to its role till its membership to the Council is vetted, till it's made more credible. Think about it. Who will punish China for Xinjiang now that China is part of this Council? And Russia? Should it not be held accountable for its never-ending nerve agent attacks? Who will quiz Pakistan on its minorities? The terror state already has a full-fledged roadmap for abusing its seat at the Council. It plans to mislead the world on Kashmir yet again. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has spoken about it right after Pakistan's election to the UNHRC. The Human Rights Council does not have a great track record, far from it. Making the voting system transparent will give the Council a chance to work on its goodwill. It gives the UNHRC the chance to discuss pressing issues. It gives the world body the opportunity to do its job, which is to promote and protect human rights around the globe. Promote and protect human rights abusers is what it's doing right now. Thailand's king is often ridiculed for spending more time overseas. Over the weekend, he returned to Bangkok. To a divided city, major protests have broken out, putting the future of the Thai monarchy in doubt. Thousands of protesters and royalists swarmed the streets, both sides unwavering in their demands. It's a question of who blinks first. Here's a report.
This is the convoy of the Thai king, passing through the heart of Bangkok. King Mahavajiralongkorn has returned home from an overseas trip. It is far from a king's welcome. Dozens of protesters have lined the streets, their hands raised in a three-fingered salute, a popular symbol of anti-establishment protests. They have three key demands: the government's resignation, a new constitution, and reforms to the monarchy. The last one being the most contentious.
I'm not scared because the monarchy has to be under the constitution. This is how it is supposed to be. But our country doesn't have it, while the developed countries have.
It's their right to call for a democracy, dissolve the parliament or the prime minister to step down. But they must not touch on the institution, especially during this golden time.
Thousands of anti-government protesters gathered at Bangkok's Democracy Monument. They marched to its centre, leaving hundreds of destroyed potted plants in their wake. Protesters say the plants were installed to prevent them from gathering. The government calls it a beauty element. Either way, they are history.
We are
taking the potted plants out of here to show that we want true democracy. And we want the Democracy Monument to be a place of meaning. It is to show that democracy is what we all truly want.
So has the Thai royal family lost favour with the people? Far from it. Just across the street from the protests, thousands of royalists gathered to mark late King Bhumibol's death anniversary. Clad in yellow shirts, they braved the rain, waiting for an appearance from the king and queen. Despite massive mobilization on both sides, things were largely peaceful. This was not Thailand's first anti-monarchy protest, but for the first time, the king was in Bangkok to witness them firsthand. These protesters are running a huge risk by taking on the monarchy. Thailand's lèse-majesté laws are among the strictest in the world. Criticizing the king carries harsh jail terms of up to 15 years. Thai protesters want radical change. The royalists will engage as long as the monarchy is not up for discussion. Both sides are firm on their demands. The question is, how long before they run out of patience? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
2 days ago, we told you how Facebook was censoring WION. We told you how Facebook has rated one of our interviews as fake news. This was our interview with a virologist from China, a dissenter. Her name is Dr. Li Mengyan, and she claims that the Wuhan virus was manufactured in a lab. And we are not saying any of this. Dr. Li Mengyan is. She has published a study. Now, too, the scientific community does not agree with her. WION provided Dr. Yan a platform to explain her claims. WION also provided a platform to her critics. So we reported all the developments with absolute transparency and without taking sides. And yet, Facebook chose to censor us. Perhaps it's not a fan of neutrality. WION was branded fake news. Our information was branded false. We informed our viewers about Facebook's censor. We also raised this issue with a fact-checking agency, the one that fact-checks for Facebook. We asked the agency to justify its flagging of WION and explain what exactly is so fake about our interview. 2 days on, there have been two developments. First, the news of Facebook censoring WION was widely circulated on social media. It reached Dr. Yan. She put out this response, and I'm quoting, "Since when could Facebook judge the validity of scientific evidence?" she asks. And then she goes on to write, and I'm quoting again, "Dare anyone represent Facebook to discuss with me point to point in a live broadcast based on two reports on the lab origin of the COVID-19 by CCP regime." Basically, she's challenging Facebook and its fact checkers to join her in a live broadcast and debate the point she's making. Facebook has not responded to the virologist's challenge. But here's what it has done. It has lifted the curbs on WION, which also brings me to development number 2. After branding our interview with the Chinese virologist as fake, it has now rated it as quote-unquote partly false. Why is that? Because the fact-checking agency says our interview contains quote-unquote baseless information regarding the coronavirus's origin. This was in the email reply sent to us by the so-called fact-checking agency, one that's been hired by Facebook. How does Facebook get to decide which information is baseless and which isn't? Even experts are debating the origin of the Wuhan virus. And a social media company based out of California has the answer, which it's giving to us as a fact. It says the virus most likely originated among the wildlife. Why does Facebook get to play the arbiter of the truth? And who gives them the right to censor journalism? These are questions we've raised. If Facebook is so interested in digging information on the origin of the Wuhan virus, it should join the investigation. It can begin by taking up Dr. Li Mengyan's challenge on a live debate on her report. On that note, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.